Welcome to Brown Box. I'm your co-host, Brian Harsch.
And I'm Chris LeRoy.
And on Brown Box, we each bring in a different record that we really enjoy and that we want to kind of hype and talk about and maybe expose some people to. So that's what we're going to be doing today.
I like that concept.
Absolutely.
And we also have a brown box. It's symbolic.
It looks a little familiar, but it's a lot of things. So let's go in the box. You want to go with what my selection is first?
Let's see.
All right. So I
dare
brought,
you. Uh-oh.
Yes, I was right. So I brought Captain Beefheart and his magic band and a little something called Trout Mask Replica. I found this when I was I think it was 16. So it's kind of nice later on in life when you become like an older record collector. You can go back to some of these things that you really maybe got on CD at the time, and then you can bring them back into your life. This particular one. I remember I had moved to Redlands, and I was starting 11th grade. And you know how it is when you just start, you move to somewhere new, and you're in a brand new environment, and it's not always something.
Yeah.
Not everyone knows you, but they've all known each other for years.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. So I had a class assignment for English, and it was like we had to make a visual or auditory. I forgot the exact specifics, but we had to make some kind of a visual or auditory representation of something we read.
Okay.
So, I had a lot of music at home. So I went home and I made a tape, pretty much like, when the Beatles would make like the abstract compositions and they'd string stuff together.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So I recorded the end of Strawberry Fields, and I recorded like nature sounds, and I kind of made it on a loop on a tape.
Wow.
And I had them playing while I was like telling a narrative. And if you didn't think I had any friends when I moved to Redlands for the first time, watch what happened after I played that tape, because I don't think anyone wanted to come near me, right? But the next day, somebody in that class came up to me and he handed me a stack of CDs, and he said, "You got to listen to these."
Wow.
Yesterday, because it was just kind of like
breakthrough.
So I mean, I'm not gonna get into all of what he gave me, because honestly, all of those were super formative to going forward to what I would listen to from then on. Wow. It was just all of them. So I don't want to talk about all of them, but this was one of them. Wow. And so the story is with this album is Captain Beefheart recorded this in late '68, released it in 1969. He was a childhood friends of Frank Zappa. So they grew up together, obviously. This was produced by Zappa, but produced is very loosely used here because this band had recorded the album for about 9 months straight, while more or less he was keeping them captive in a house. And so, I mean, there's a whole story to this that we can definitely get into. We will not. Just know that it's the first time I listened to it, I didn't really like it. It was very, and anyone who listens to it for the first time, it's going to be very hard for you to digest it, because there's a lot going on. Everyone's playing the different time signature. There's different types of music, basically clashing against each other. So you have blues, you have free jazz, you have rock. Just this big melting pot of things happening all at the same time. And then you have this guy, singing over it. When they recorded it, he was singing over tracks that were leaking through the sound booth.
Yeah.
He didn't like earphones because apparently he had an incident where he put an earphone on in a studio and he had some big squall of feedback and it almost blew out his eardrum. So he did not
Was that a lo-fi studio?
Yeah, probably, right? Yeah, it could have been. So he would just listen to the bleed through from the control room of the music and attempt to sing over it. And attempt to play, he had someone playing clarinet, but attempt to play like a saxophone, which he wasn't a sax player.
No.
But anyway, it's 2 LPs. It's like 80 minutes. 20-something songs. Now, the more I listen to it, it just became one of my favorite records, just because it is so out there and it's so different, and no one has done anything like it since. And they probably never will. And some people are still trying to maybe figure out what it is. What's your relationship with it, if you have one at all?
Oh, no, it's sort of similar. I mean, I certainly knew about Frank Zappa and then about Captain Beefheart through that. I knew that they were compatriots. Maybe it heard Safe as Milk or something before. Well, there's a little more form.
Yeah.
A little bluesier. But there's a book called Stranded. I think like you're stranded on a desert island.
Right.
And the different authors. I think Girl Marcus edited it, and people picked like the album they would be on their desert island disc. Well, and that was the only album they could have, and so some of the things make sense, but the best essay in the whole thing is the person who chooses this album. And the reasons they have is this, well, it's a double album, and there's lots of songs. And so you'll have a lot of time on your hands, and you could, start through these songs and have ongoing greatest hits, or, what's the top of the pops, and you just go through all these different things. It's a music that grows on you.
It does.
And
like a fungus.
It certainly does. And I would listen to, back then, I would listen to music for an extended time, have it on my little vinyl machine there, and would listen to it, and I would always just go back and just start again when I would be writing and thinking. And this and probably Jimi Hendrix Are You Experienced album, the two pieces of music that I listened to the most.
Wow.
Jimi Hendrix being an obvious choice.
Right.
This being the less obvious choice, because I was surprised that I got into it so deeply and could start, singing along with him, and started getting these stories, and you realize he has this dense poetry.
Yes, that's what it is.
And it is actually solvable, and you start to hear these stories emerge, and there's a great beauty in his language.
There is.
And what would seem like a cacophony of sound ends up making sense, just like you make sense of the words, you start to make sense of this sound, and it just sounds like a normal album to me.
And there's a clip on YouTube of Matt Groening, the creator of The Simpsons. And it's about a minute long, but he talks about this album. And his experience is the same as everyone else's. Like, you get it and you don't like it at first. But he says what did it for him is when he started to understand that they were playing this way on purpose. Like, they were, and these guys were not bad musicians.
No,
I mean, they were like, I mean, even like your free jazz artists, like people think they are just playing bad. They are all like highly trained. Yeah. So it's definitely a discipline. But yeah, I mean, what he said in that clip really, like, it just said, it makes complete sense, because they are playing that way on purpose. They're highly disciplined, and they're meaning it to sound that way. And then they're also breaking these barriers through what they're doing.
It's a very free music, and in some ways, if you haven't listened to jazz music, you say here's a whole genre of stuff that you somehow just not come into your life. At the beginning, it seems a little formless, or it seems like, and even though there's intense form, you go back all the way to Louis Armstrong, these are songs with form. But even Louis Armstrong had this freedom to jump through that music, and he would play rhythmically something so challenging up in that music. And sometimes I listen to Louis Armstrong and hear how he's cutting across this music in this very, very free thing. I go, this is the same as Anthony Braxton. Yep. This is the same as all these free players.
Coleman. Yeah.
This is the same as that.
Right.
That there's a language that's cutting through. There's a sound of music, and there's these pathways in this music. It's just a fantastic album.
Yeah.
And again, it's one of these things. you like, for the students who saw you when you were doing that presentation, if you had handed out an album to each one of those people, still it'd only be that one guy that would come back and bring you the CD.
And I don't even know who that guy is. You know what I mean? It's like he could have been. He just walk on the set, and then it's like he's gone. You know?
Really?
But no, I think he I don't talk to him to this day, but I know he went on to like an Ivy League school. He's like very, very intelligent. But the music he gave me was like, I can draw a line between that day and like everything that came before it, and then everything that came after, and it kind of like what I listened to.
Yeah.
And like this for sure. If you were to listen to this for the first time, probably like recommend. It's great that it's 4 sides, like if you can listen to it on a record, please do.
Yes. Because
it's best to listen to like maybe just as pieces if you're just starting out. If you have a party at your house and you want to get rid of everybody, you could definitely put this on too. That'll work in both instances. Then you can just stay and listen to it and enjoy it.
Along that line. And it's not to clear the house, but it's another kind of like the Dylan book that we talked about earlier
Right.
is a great compendium or a great partner for the basement tapes. There's a wonderful 33 and a third
Yes.
book. It's a very, very personal take
Mm-hmm.
about this album, and it kind of follows the same pattern.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting the way he inherits the first version of that album.
Yes.
But that's another. That would be another guide. If
Mhm.
you were going to have a neat guide through this album, that would be a great book.
It's essential.
Yeah, to look through and just see how other people have experienced it, because it's one of the best albums ever made.
I think it is.
And
You may call me crazy for saying that.
You may
know,
be
but,
crazy.
Hey,
that makes two of us. But it's
right.
it's one of my favorite albums.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad you like it too.
Yeah.
Did you bring anything today?
I did bring something.
What you got?
So get crazy
let's get
Captain
out of the way.
out of there. Crazy as a lunatic.
There we go.
From 1976, Flamin Groovies.
Nice.
Shake Some Action. Again, one of the most influential albums in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And very unsung band. Flash through pre-punk era,
Mm-hmm.
more like pub rock thing,
Sure.
but they're not a pub
Right.
rock band. They're like the heart of rock music, the heart of rock and roll music. And
Mhm.
you hear earlier versions of the Flamin Groovies, and they're sort of making that bridge between rock and roll music.
Right.
And because you can see their intense love
Yes.
for the music that came before, and they create something that would have stood the test of time in the 60s, and they would have been as celebrated as big name bands,
Right.
because of the song quality, the sound. Dave Edmunds produced it, and when I listened to it, I thought, well, this has to be a reissue for something,
Sure.
because this couldn't be music from 1976, and I probably got it around 78. maybe.
Okay.
So right in the cusp of the bands that I was going to be involved with.
Sure.
The Dangers were starting up, and then when I'd make my little cassette mixes and we'd be driving to the band practice, I remember sharing this with John. I said, there's this great music. Tony loves it.
Mm-hmm.
You love it. And John still sings "Shake Some Action" as a part of what they do within. We did in the Dangers, but the Flamin Groovies captured kind of the feel of kind of Beatles song construct. Dave Edmunds gave him the sound of the studio and the mics and whatnot, and yet it doesn't sound like a throwback. They're not like copying the Beatles.
Yeah.
It's like a band who would have coexisted during that time.
Sure.
And they just happened to show up. It's like they got on the wrong train.
Yeah, right. You look at them.
Yeah.
Like, look at the back. They're all hanging out.
Yeah.
They're all in suits.
They're all in
right?
suits.
Which
They
is
got on the
cool.
wrong train
Mhm.
somewhere in the
They got
1965,
lost.
and it kept going.
Yeah. They're in a time warp.
And they got
Yes.
off the train, and it was 1976. It says, "Damn, we have all these great songs.
Uh-huh.
Shake Some Action." Sometimes, yes, it's
Mhm.
true. Yes, it's true.
Mhm.
I mean, all these are just like classic songs that, if they had gotten off the train earlier, they would be one of the most celebrated bands, and they still can be. So if you seek out this album again on vinyl, they sound better.
You gotta listen to
But
it. Yeah.
but any way that you can find anything about the Flamin Groovies is wonderful. They're very unsung songwriters, Roy Loney, singers, and just this inhabiting the spirit of what great bands do, where they have a sound and a feeling and an emotion. 2.5-minute songs.
Yep.
Out of there.
You have a good producer.
Great. Well, Dave
Yeah.
Edmunds, folks kind of try to treat him as though he was this sort of retro person. I think he had a difficulty not sounding like, because he lived the slapback echo, and he
Right.
had that as a part of him. But he was so much more than that.
Mhm.
This is the best thing he's ever involved with.
Okay.
And it's one of those albums that you'll listen to over and over and over again, because you fall in love with these songs and fall in love with these chords. And when I sit around with my guitar and just go over, and there's just this chord that maybe someone wouldn't use to
Yeah.
get you from here to here, and they're sort of masters of that. And it sounds very. I mean, people would complain about it. I mean, probably when it came out, they said it sounds muddy.
Uh-huh.
It sounds like it was kind of mixed through a.
Do you think they meant it to sound that way?
I am sure.
Sure.
They were headed that way, but it almost sounds a little bit kind of like a mistake. Like it was.
Yeah.
Like there was some sort of fuzz over the top.
It's okay.
You pick up the needle and you blow on it.
Right.
There's something.
Yeah.
But it is that sound, and it is this music, and I wouldn't change a molecule on this album. And it was special to me. It was special to my band because we said, "Oh my goodness, there's a band we want to be as cool as the Flamin Groovies, and someday we'll get there."
Yeah.
But
the UK band, right?
Yes.
So it's like when they came out, like there weren't, this is like the Clash were just kind of like starting, or they were just like starting to get bigger.
Well,
right?
there was all the, Bridgley Schwartz, there was all these pub bands, Graham Parker,
Yeah.
that they launched in these English clubs,
Uh-huh.
and the Ramones hadn't landed in England and just
Right.
injected everybody
Just about to.
with just the power and the speed of the song.
Yeah.
That never became a part of who they were.
Yeah.
They were proud of their kind of 60s heritage.
Mm-hmm.
And again, in my experience in a band, Dangerous would be in the middle of, we started in 1979. So we were in the middle of all the punk era.
It's a good year, a lot going on.
Wonderful, wonderful family of musicians, especially out here in the Riverside area, between here and LA, San Bernardino, the Beat.
Yeah.
We would be in these shows at the Ritz or at the Beat or somewhere local, and it'd be like 4 punk bands and then the Dangers in the middle, and then 4 more punk bands.
Yeah.
And at the beginning, it was like, man, you guys aren't cool. You're not punk. And all I had, I was just like, you need to listen to the Flamin Groovies and come back and talk with me.
Mm-hmm.
And by the end of the show or by the next time they saw us, go, you guys are so cool. You're not even punk.
Yeah.
So it was a little bit of wish fulfillment. I go, you got to be who you are.
Sure.
And the music that they made is authentic.
Yep.
And
it's them.
It's them. And this album is the best example of who they were.
And it's funny because, punks, they'll point to this album too.
Oh, yeah.
And Johnny Rotten said, this is my favorite album.
Yeah.
And he did. And Joe Strummer, and I think both of them, because it's like that individuality.
Yes.
These guys here, they have like that kind of garage sound to me a little bit, but they exist on a different plane, because a lot of those garage bands, you can just get, you hear one song, and it's just so many of them. But these guys, like you said, they had a little bit of that Beatles, songwriting approach and craft, which made them stand out and which made them different. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah. So in their individual, the power of being an individual and standing out and sticking by the music that motivates you, the music that cooks inside of you. If you're lucky enough to get it on wax, if you're lucky enough to get it turned out, then you've got something, young man.
If you're brave enough to wear a hat like that.
That's right. Or have
put a fish up in front of your face.
Oh, is that really just in front of his face?
What do you think it was?
He was a genius.
Yeah.
And all the Captain Beefheart catalog, you can go from the very earliest all the way to his last albums. He was also a painter, and he finally said, well, I'm just going to stay out in the desert.
82, he stopped playing. And if you really want some kind of trippy videos, go watch old David Letterman with this guy when he come on like right near the end of his music career, and those are very interesting.
Yeah,
very interesting.
Very, very smart guy. Mm-hmm. And he's funny and he's quirky, but he's also something deeper.
Right.
And I think he probably resented that in some ways that Zappa kind of used him as kind of clowning in a way. But Zappa was being a producer, and he got the album out. So you can't really fault that, but you have not as many Flamin Groovy albums, but there's 5 or 6. But with Captain Beefheart, there's a lot. There's a trail.
It's a good handful
of
66 up to '82, I think.
Yeah.
So you got a good, and they're all kind of different, you know.
Mhm.
So
And so you go this or Ice Cream for Crow or
Mhm.
wherever you want to go, you're going to end up with good music if you go to the Brown Box and go with Flamin Groovies, Trout Mask Replica. I'm looking forward, Ryan, to the next time we get together with the Brown Box
yes,
because we get so excited about these things.
yes. We both have pretty wonderful record collections, and we love to share what gets us going. Thank you, everybody, for another installation of Brown Box. Ryan Harsch.
And Chris LeRoy.
Thank you so much.